There are people walking this world who look ordinary, but their spirit is anything but. You might be one of them, and if you are, you're not just chosen, you are dangerously anointed. Dangerous to darkness, dangerous to stagnation, dangerous to every chain that ever tried to hold your family down. Because when God marks someone, they don't need a title. Their life speaks louder than their resume. There are people who move through the world without raising their voice, without demanding attention, without performing for the crowd, and yet every room they enter subtly rearranges itself. You may not fully understand it, but others feel it instantly. They feel the shift in the atmosphere. They feel the unspoken authority. They feel the weight of something you're not even trying to display. This is the nature of a silent power, one that does not announce itself with noise, but with presence. Silent power isn't about being loud, charismatic, or socially dominant. It's the opposite. It's the sensation of someone who carries depth, inner stability, and an unshakable self-awareness. People who possess this kind of presence rarely understand the effect they have on others because it's not something they intentionally cultivate. It comes from the hardships they've endured, the truths they've accepted, and the emotional battles they've had to fight alone. You do not speak it, you radiate it. When you carry silent power, people react to you in ways that confuse you. Some appear intimidated without ever having a conflict with you. Others become defensive even when you've done nothing to provoke them. Certain personalities try to challenge you, not because they dislike you, but because something in you triggers something unresolved in them. Your quiet confidence confronts their hidden insecurity. Your strength exposes their weakness. Your presence reveals what they try to hide beneath noise, arrogance, or false confidence. This is why people with silent power often experience odd forms of resistance. You may notice that individuals try to compete with you in conversations you didn't sign up for. They may escalate small disagreements into unnecessary battles. They may try to dominate you verbally or socially, as if trying to reclaim a territory they never owned. They behave this way because your calmness threatens the illusion they built around themselves. Your energy unravels the persona they've invested in, and they don't know how to balance themselves around someone who doesn't need external validation. Silent power is uncomfortable for those who rely on noise. They are used to measuring strength by volume, by titles, by how many people listen when they speak. But your strength comes from somewhere deeper. It comes from restraint, from emotional discipline, from the clarity to observe rather than react. It comes from understanding yourself to a degree that most people avoid. You don't need to advertise who you are, you simply are. And that is enough to disrupt the equilibrium of those who are not grounded within themselves. People sense this power long before they consciously identify it. It shows up in the way you listen. It shows up in the way you look at someone, not with judgment, but with a kind of piercing awareness. It shows up in your posture, your stillness, your ability to remain composed in situations where others would crumble or explode. People don't understand why you don't break easily, why you don't get rattled, or why you don't join the emotional chaos. They mistake your calm for weakness until they realize it's the exact opposite. Only those with deep reservoirs of strength remain calm while others drown in their own reactions. This silent power is also why certain people open up to you unexpectedly. They sense safety in your presence, even if they cannot explain it. They sense that you listen from a deeper place, that you see beyond the surface, that your understanding is not shallow or performative. People tell you their truths because something in you makes them feel seen, perhaps for the first time. But with this gift also comes a strange burden. You may find that others depend on your steadiness, even when you feel unsettled inside. They trust your aura more than you trust your own strength. Silent power is not something you acquire. It is something you grow into. It is shaped by adversity, strengthened by self-awareness, and sharpened by the moments where you had no one to lean on but yourself. Life carved it into you. Experience forged it. Pain refined it. And now it sits beneath your skin, moving with you quietly, influencing your world without your permission. This is why you cannot hide, even when you want to. Your energy is too distinct. Your presence is too impactful. You walk into a room and people feel the gravity of someone who has met themselves in the dark and did not run. You carry a truth that others sense even when they do not understand it. This is your silent power, and it is the kind of power that does not need to shout to be heard. There comes a point in life where isolation stops feeling like a temporary phase and begins to feel like a companion that shows up uninvited, sits beside you quietly and refuses to leave no matter how much you wish things were different. It's not that you dislike people or that you've given up on connection. It's that something within you has shifted so profoundly that the spaces and relationships that once felt natural now feel foreign. You stand in a room full of people and somehow feel miles away. You sit with friends you once trusted, and suddenly the conversation feels hollow. It's as if you woke up one day speaking a different emotional language, one that only a few rare souls understand. Isolation for many looks like abandonment or loneliness. But for someone who's changing, evolving, or awakening, isolation becomes the byproduct of internal expansion. You no longer fit the environments you once molded yourself for. You no longer tolerate dynamics that require you to shrink. You no longer have the energy to maintain connections built on convenience rather than authenticity. Your spirit begins to reject what your mind once accepted. And so distance forms, not out of malice, but out of necessity. This distance may feel like a wound at first. Question yourself, wondering why people no longer relate to you the way they used to. You replay conversations, searching for something you said or did to trigger the shift. You look at old relationships and wonder why they suddenly feel so fragile. But the truth is simpler and far more profound. You changed. You grew in ways that were invisible to others, but undeniable to your own soul. And growth always has a price, and that price is often human connection. People who once felt close now feel far because the version of you they were attached to no longer exists. You begin to see dynamics for what they truly were, temporary alignments, not lifelong bonds. You notice patterns you overlooked before, the one-sided friendships, the emotional imbalances, the people who benefited from your silence, your giving, your strength. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Your awareness expands, and with that awareness comes separation. Isolation becomes your companion not because you choose it, but because you refuse to betray yourself by returning to spaces that undermine your growth. You still crave connection. You still long for understanding, but you will no longer settle for relationships built on pretending or performing. And so, until you meet people who resonate with your new frequency, you walk alone. This loneliness carries a strange duality. On one hand, it feels heavy, like a weight sitting on your chest that no one can see. On the other hand, it feels sacred, like a quiet chamber where your soul finally has room to breathe. In this solitude, you learn things about yourself that crowds never allowed you to discover. You realize how much of your identity was shaped by expectations. You notice the masks you wore to belong. You understand the compromises you made to keep peace. You acknowledge the exhaustion that came from being everything for everyone while rarely being understood yourself. Isolation forces you to confront your own reflection without distraction. It brings your wounds to the surface. It exposes the emotions you tucked away for years. It reveals the truth of who you are when no one is watching. And while this process is uncomfortable, even painful, it is also transformative. There is no growth without solitude. There is no clarity without distance. There is no elevation without separation. This unwanted companion teaches you discernment. You begin to recognize who drains you and who nourishes you. You learn the difference between people who love you and people who simply use you. You stop trying to force connections that were never meant to be permanent. Instead, you conserve your energy, protect your boundaries, and rebuild your life with intention rather than habit. Along the way, you may feel misunderstood by those who still expect you to be who you were before your internal shift. They may accuse you of being distant, changed, or unavailable. And in a way, they're right. You have changed. But what they fail to understand is that you didn't choose distance out of coldness. You chose it because your soul outgrew environments that refused to grow with you. Isolation is not a punishment, it is a recalibration. As you continue walking this solitary path, you begin to realize that isolation is not empty. It is preparation. It is refinement. It is the silent space where your future self is being formed. And while you may not have chosen this companion, you learn to walk beside it with a kind of reluctant acceptance, knowing that this uncomfortable distance is shaping you into someone you were always meant to become. There is a moment in every transformative journey when the battles around you begin to multiply, not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are finally doing something right. The moment your calling activates, something in the unseen world shifts. You step onto a path that was always meant for you, and suddenly the resistance becomes louder, sharper, and more strategic. It feels as if life tightens its grip, throwing challenges from angles you never expected. People change, circumstances shift, conflicts arise out of nowhere. What once felt stable now feels unpredictable, and you find yourself questioning why the pressure increased the moment you stepped into your purpose. Warfare intensifies because purpose intensifies. The battles become heavier because your spirit becomes stronger. When you begin walking toward the life you were designed to live, everything that benefits from your hesitation, your fear, or your silence feels threatened. And instead of confronting you directly, these forces use subtle tactics. Distractions, emotional turmoil, sudden chaos, old wounds resurfacing, people switching up without explanation. It's not random, it's a reaction. Your calling activates a kind of spiritual alarm. The very moment you align with your truth, anything built on falsehood rises against you. You are no longer drifting. You are no longer asleep. You are no longer easy to manipulate. You become aware, intentional, and anchored. That kind of clarity disrupts everything that once operated in your blind spots. This is why the moment you start healing, old toxins return. The moment you start setting boundaries, certain people get offended. The moment you step into courage, fear tries to disguise itself as logic. And the moment you choose growth, life tests your commitment to it. Many people assume warfare is punishment, but for those stepping into purpose, warfare is confirmation. It is evidence that you are shifting frequencies. It means you are no longer harmless to the systems that depended on your confusion. Your transformation interferes with the comfort zones of others, especially those who benefited from your old patterns. And instead of growing with you, they resist you. Instead of celebrating your evolution, they challenge it. Instead of supporting your calling, they question it. The battles you face begin to mirror the depth of your potential. This warfare doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it comes in the form of mental exhaustion. Sometimes it arrives as emotional heaviness or waves of self-doubt. Sometimes it shows up as unexpected delays, sudden betrayals, or opportunities slipping right through your fingers. You begin to feel pulled between who you used to be and who you're becoming. That tension is spiritual. It is the pressure of transition. It is the friction between your past and your destiny. What makes this stage particularly confusing is that the battles often intensify right after a moment of clarity or breakthrough. You feel inspired, motivated, ready to move forward, and then without warning, something hits you that makes you second-guess everything. This is not coincidence. It is the last push of resistance before alignment. Whenever you are close to stepping through a door meant for you, the opposition attempts to pull you backward. Warfare tries to convince you to forfeit what is already yours. Yet the very pressure you feel is also shaping you. The struggles strengthen your discernment. The setbacks sharpen your vision. The emotional turbulence forces you to rely on your inner anchor rather than external validation. You begin to see who truly stands with you. You discover who can handle your growth. You learn what environments nurture your spirit and which ones drain it. The battle becomes the filter that reveals what aligns with your calling and what does not. And within this turbulence, something unexpected happens. You grow. Not in the dramatic sense of outward victory, but in the quiet, gradual expansion of your soul. You become resilient in ways you never imagined. You begin to recognize patterns before they consume you. You protect your peace with more intention. You learn the power of withdrawing from anything designed to distract you. Your intuition sharpens. Your voice strengthens. Your purpose becomes non-negotiable. This is why warfare intensifies when your calling activates, because you are being prepared for what you asked for. You cannot walk into a higher level with the mindset of your previous one. You cannot carry old fears into a new season. You cannot hold on to expired versions of yourself and expect to thrive in your purpose. The battles you face are removing what cannot come with you. They are breaking down what would have sabotaged you later. They are clearing the path, even if the process feels chaotic. As the warfare increases, something deep within you begins to rise as well. You stop reacting emotionally to every disturbance. You stop apologizing for choosing yourself. You stop shrinking to maintain harmony that was never real. You stop doubting the inner pull that keeps guiding you forward, and slowly, without realizing it, you begin walking with a conviction that no amount of resistance can silence. There comes a stage in your inner evolution when your intuition begins to operate on a level that no longer fits neatly into the categories of logic or reason. You start noticing that you know things without knowing how you know them. You sense truths long before they reveal themselves. You feel the emotional temperature in a room the moment you enter it. People's words matter less than the energy behind them, and you can detect dishonesty, insecurity, or hidden motives in the smallest pauses, the slightest shifts, the quietest tones. It's not a skill you learned, it's a capacity that awakened. When your intuition sharpens, you stop relying solely on the five senses that everyone else depends on. You begin to see with a different kind of vision, one rooted in awareness rather than observation. You recognize patterns in people's behavior, connections between events and meanings behind circumstances that others overlook completely. You can sense when something is beginning long before it starts, and you can feel when something is ending long before anyone speaks it aloud. You feel the truth beneath the surface, even when the surface looks calm and polished. This heightened intuition often makes you feel like you're perceiving the world at a deeper frequency. Someone can smile at you, and you instantly know whether the smile is genuine or forced. Someone can say they're fine, and your spirit recognizes the storm beneath their calm expression. Someone can walk into your space, and you immediately pick up on whether their energy nourishes you or depletes you. You might not always verbalize these impressions, but your body responds instantly. An uneasiness in your chest, a tightening in your stomach, or a sudden shift in your mood. Your intuition speaks through subtle signals long before your mind catches up. This ability can feel like both a blessing and a burden. On one hand, it protects you. It keeps you out of relationships that would have drained you. It warns you about people before their true intentions unfold. It helps you navigate situations that others walk into blindly. On the other hand, it can create a sense of isolation because you perceive what others ignore. You feel when someone is lying to themselves, even when they truly believe their own story. You notice emotional inconsistencies in people you care about. You sense tension no one else acknowledges. This knowledge creates distance, not because you want it, but because you cannot pretend you don't see what you see. As your intuition sharpens, your tolerance for superficiality fades. You find it difficult to engage in meaningless conversations or maintain relationships built on half-truths. You crave authenticity because anything else feels draining. You become selective with your time, careful with your energy, and intentional about the environments you enter. This selectivity is not arrogance, it is spiritual self-preservation. When you can feel people's motives, emotions, and unspoken intentions, you naturally become more protective of your inner world. Your intuition also helps you recognize timing. You sense when it's time to move forward, even when the path is unclear. You sense when it's time to let go, even when nothing dramatic has happened. You sense when something is shifting internally, pushing you toward growth or away from what no longer aligns. While others rely solely on evidence, you rely on an inner pull, something quiet, steady, and persistent. It's the kind of knowing that feels older than your experiences, older than your fears, older than your doubts. And though others may question your decisions because they don't see what you see, You begin to trust yourself more deeply. You learn to honor the feeling that rises within you before you can justify it logically. You understand that intuition is not irrational, it is pre-rational. It knows before the mind analyzes. It sees before the eyes observe. It understands before words are spoken. This sharpened intuition also reveals people's emotional wounds with uncanny clarity. You can feel when someone is projecting their pain onto you. You can sense when envy hides behind a compliment. You can detect when someone is pulling away emotionally long before they communicate it. You see the roots of conflict instead of just the surface expressions. You understand why people act the way they do, even when they don't understand it themselves. This insight allows you to respond with wisdom rather than reaction, compassion rather than confusion. The deeper your intuition becomes, the more aware you are of synchronicities, those seemingly small coincidences that align in ways too meaningful to dismiss. You begin noticing signs, repeated patterns, symbolic moments, and subtle spiritual nudges guiding you forward. You feel connected to an inner rhythm that doesn't rely on logic but on alignment. You begin to live with a sense of guidance rather than guessing, with clarity rather than chaos, and with a knowing that cannot be easily explained or dismissed. There are people who pass through life repeating the same stories they inherited, stories of fear, limitation, dysfunction, and silence. They continue the cycles handed to them because it's all they've ever known. But then there are others who arrive in a family, in a lineage, in a community, and something about them refuses to comply with what has always been. Something in their spirit resists the script that generations accepted as normal. Something inside them refuses to live out the same emotional patterns, the same traumas, the same expectations. These people are not rebels for the sake of rebellion. They are the ones chosen to rewrite what everyone else assumed was unchangeable. When you break patterns others thought were permanent, you don't do it loudly at first. You do it quietly, often painfully, often alone. The shift begins inside you long before anyone else notices it. You start questioning behaviors, beliefs, and traditions that never made sense to you. You start feeling uncomfortable in dynamics that once felt familiar. You sense that the way things have always been is not the way things have to remain. And even though you may not yet have the words for it, your soul begins pulling you in a direction that feels different from anything you've known. This inner pull is what separates you from those who repeat cycles without question. You don't just feel pain, you feel the meaning beneath the pain. You don't just experience dysfunction, you see through it. You observe the patterns in your family, your environment, your relationships, and you begin to understand that these cycles were never personal. They were inherited, passed down unconsciously, carried from one generation to the next like emotional heirlooms. But where others see inevitability, you see interruption. Where others see destiny, you see a doorway. Breaking patterns requires a kind of courage that few understand. It's not the courage to fight others, it's the courage to confront yourself. You have to face the wounds that created the cycles. You have to acknowledge the behaviors you picked up for survival. You have to recognize the beliefs that were shaped by people who were wounded themselves. This process is not glamorous. It is messy, emotional, exhausting, and often misunderstood. You become the one who breaks the silence, who challenges the unspoken rules, who disrupts the family dynamics that have existed for decades. And because of this, you are often met with resistance. People resist you not because you are wrong, but because your growth exposes their stagnation. Your healing highlights their avoidance. Your emotional clarity contrasts with their denial. When you change, the equilibrium of the entire system is threatened. And instead of confronting their own wounds, many people prefer to question you, criticize you, distance themselves from you. They say you're different, and they don't mean it as a compliment. But even in that discomfort, you keep evolving, because something inside you refuses to return to what harmed you, simply because it is familiar. As you continue to break these patterns, you begin noticing that the traits others called weaknesses are actually strengths. Your sensitivity becomes insight. Your independence becomes resilience. Your questioning becomes wisdom. Your refusal to settle becomes empowerment. You start choosing relationships that nurture you instead of ones that drain you. You begin creating boundaries where none existed before. You choose honesty over silence, growth over comfort, truth over conformity. These choices may seem small, but they carry generational impact. Breaking patterns also means breaking identities you once believed were permanent. You shed beliefs about who you are and what you deserve. You release labels that were placed on you by people who didn't understand you. You stop repeating emotional habits that once defined you. Slowly, you begin to see yourself clearly, not as who you were taught to be, but as who you truly are. This clarity becomes the foundation for the new patterns you are building. And while the world around you may not immediately understand your transformation, something subtle begins happening over time. Those who resisted you start watching you. Those who doubted you begin learning from your example. Those who once felt threatened by your growth eventually recognize that your healing is not an attack, it is an invitation. You become living proof that change is possible even when it feels impossible. You become evidence that patterns are not prisons, that cycles are not destiny, and that transformation is not only for the courageous but for the willing. People who once believed certain behaviors or emotional wounds were permanent begin to question their own limitations. They see you choosing differently, speaking differently, loving differently, and something inside them awakens. This is what it means to break patterns. It is not just about freeing yourself. It is about freeing the generations before you and influencing the generations after you. You become the turning point in a story that has repeated itself for far too long.